Okay, how about that? Does that work?
Yes. Yep, I heard it. Yep.
And can we hear everybody else?
Yep, we can.
Everybody else is coming through? Okay, good. So we're good to go.
Quiet. We're kind of quiet.
Okay, how about now?
I'm just gonna keep talking so you have something to go off of. I'm going to describe what I'm looking at right now. It's a yellow square that says Serious Play with the Lunchzone logo on it, followed by pink text that says Start Soon.
Yeah.
I think you're forgetting the donut.
I was getting there. A wonderfully glazed donut.
Uh-huh.
What's that fancy? Oh, go ahead.
It sounds kind of like we're in the room, but we're like very far away.
Okay, how about... Okay, so I'm just going to turn you guys up.
Yeah. What's that fancy glaze called? Like the mirror glaze sort of stuff that they use on cakes
On
and
GBBO.
Is this working?
Yeah, it sounds a little better.
It sounds a little bit better. I've turned you guys up on Discord.
Yep, we're good. We're good.
All right, good. So I'm going to go on to this one now. So you should be able to see me.
Yes.
Okay, good. Doc Strangest has joined us. Is that Thomas? Thomas Malaby.
Yes, it is.
Hello. Well, I'll just start the intro again, I guess. Welcome to Lunchzone. It's my first time, hence the technical issues. My name is Matthew Carricker. I'm a PhD student on deferral at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And I'm joined here today by some new colleagues of mine, some new friends, who are much more veterans of this than I am. So who do we have?
I am David Kuchik. I am a PhD student in the English department here at UWM.
I am Casey James, PhD candidate in the English department at UWM.
And I'm Thomas Malaby, professor of anthropology at UWM.
I am Morgan Forbush. I am a master's student in anthropology at UWM.
I am Ren. I am a master's student at UWM, and I had a clever thing to say, but I forgot it.
That's okay, Ren. We have the rest of the hour to say, anything that we can think of. At least one thing, for me anyway. I'm here. We're going to talk about... normally, I think on Lunchzone we play other people's games, but today we're going to talk about the... Oh. You guys still hear me?
Yes.
I got an ominous pop-up on my on my computer. But that's fine. We're gonna talk about spreadsheets today and how dungeon masters or game masters can utilize them in their games, especially now that with the pandemic and probably the inevitable other global crises that are going to keep us indoors. We're using screens and we're intermediating in different ways to play. The chat's behind the camera. Intermediating in different ways. I don't know.
You're gonna have to resize a bunch of stuff to fix it. I just leave it as it is.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's happened to me for a stream too. I swear.
So I've been using Google Sheets as opposed to Excel, which I did use before when we were still round at my table anyway. Sheets is good because you can have a co-presence, right, with other people. You can look at the same spreadsheet at the same time and edit it. And I think that's really important for some of the sheets I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you three projects that I've built in Google Sheets. And I was hoping that we could talk about the ways in which the Dungeon Master is sort of classically seen as a isolated labor, but it's opening up and the potential for it to open up into a more networked kind of thing. We were talking before we went live about different approaches to dungeon mastering, whether you prepare a lot, you're a railroader, you're a sandboxer, and really I think it all comes down to your comfort level with uncertainty and how much you're comfortable letting things just happen and seeing where it goes. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna begin with one of these here, a character sheet, a hypertextual character sheet here, for one of my characters, who I play with, Sir Salison. And the important thing I want to show here is the ways in which you can have complex stuff in the character sheet, but you can simplify it for the player, and also the way in which there's space for anything to grow in a spreadsheet. So here you have, I suppose it looked confusing to people who haven't built this stuff, and I'm aware of that sort of difference. So please, if anybody has any questions as we go, just talk and interrupt me, because otherwise I'll just continue to fill the air as I go through the sheet. So everybody know, in spreadsheets you have formulas, you have conditional formatting, you have, even in sheets you can use JavaScript, in Excel you can use Visual Basic to write things, and macro recorders as well. And these are really powerful tools for organizing ourselves as dungeon masters, and organizing data, which is the big thing. Turning your campaign into modular data that can be used in any manner of ways. So what do I mean by this? So here is a table, and this is for the players a kind of this for the players is a kind of way in which they know what they can do and when. And I do that through a conditional formatting up here. So if I click all, we'll bring up all of the possibilities, right? And what you can do is you can have all of the skills that you want people to be able to do, but you can hide them, right? You can hide them based on their scores. And so as the scores change, what happens is people see the range of agency that they have as players, And I think I'm just going to go through this character sheet as an introduction, because we all know what a character sheet should look like, right? We all know what it looks like. And so this is a good hybrid to get us into the Excel realm.
It's a theoretical question and interrupt the formula. So, because we were talking about in our methodology seminar that you're not but pretty much saying how problematic sometimes data can be as a word when we're trying to describe human experiences, and a character sheet is literally quantifying a person's ability to do things. So I'm just kind of curious, how did you go about did you come up with the descriptions of what people can and can't do? How do you feel like this character sheet plays into that, or plays against that sort of push against data for quantifying human experience?
Yeah, totally. I mean, character sheets quantify qualitative aspects of people's characters, strength, dexterity. These are, the numeric categories. And in answer to your question to how I filled the grid, I built it with my players. I think somebody couldn't come to the session that night, and so we didn't know what to do. And so instead what we did was we filled this page together, and trying to think of what level somebody would be able to do what. And so my fighter character helped me build the strength one, the rogue helped me build the dexterity one, and that kind of thing. And so I guess what you're looking at here is a group process, a game in itself, to design it. Just to take some skills as a couple of examples. Strength is probably the most commonsensical one. As your strength increases, you can use larger weapons, you can use different kinds of attacks. And as you go higher, you can unlock things like plate armor and stuff. And this is just a way for me to let the players know quite simply what they can do. If they drop below 5, you might notice some negative things there. So if you have a strength of 5, you have weak hands. There's a chance you drop your weapon when attacked, And so there's a way for the players to see the consequences of how they spread their scores. My players really enjoy when, as experience, I give them 1d4 points, and they can increase their scores, and they can see the colors change, and they can see the way that their progress is. And that's something that you can achieve in sheets, is that really basic, Civ 5 shine, where you have you feel good because things are colorful and they're changing, Same with the bar charts here, hit points and mana. And I edit these actually from another Dungeon Master page. But so they can see when they get attacked, their health bar goes down, you know, or their mana goes down when they cast a spell. So I wanted to show that, and also an inventory section, because one of the things about role-playing games is, you know, we have all of these things presumably on a character, but we don't know where they are, we don't know where they're located, or sometimes we just sort of like go without them. And the level of detail, you know, you can have as much detail, as simple or as complicated as you want. I think the point of this inventory thing that I would argue is that you can have a complex thing but simplify it because you have the data, you have the formulas maintaining things. So here, for example, you can list your containers and give them a max pounds, and then through the data validation feature, you can then have these containers here show up in the inventory. So when you put something in your character sheet, you just you can put where something is, and also a little bit of error, you know, red if something goes wrong, you see, because it's not got a container. So a little bit of conditional formatting there. And so the other thing is you can link to things. I write books for my players, at least little passages from them, and you can put them in a file, you can link to them in the inventory, so you can just go straight to it. And then I guess the only other thing I want to show on the character sheet is the relations, because this is how I manage NPCs. I have a NPC generator, that's another spreadsheet, and it basically spits out a random person, which we can see here. And what I'll do is when they meet somebody, I'll put their name and then insert as a note the garbage here, and then they can see the scores and things. And for me, it's not important whether this stuff is like accurate so much or like fits their understanding of the NPC. The point is that it's there and it anchors it. So if we ever have a question of what is Father Godwin's wisdom, well, it isn't actually in that one, it's a bad example. What is this barbarian's constitution? It's there, you know, and it exists, and it's right there in the player's character sheet. So organizing that data, you know, and well, that question, Casey, about data being a bit of an ambiguous concept, you know, that's what really attracts me to, you've got the kind of qualitative data we have in anthropology, but then we also have questions of big data, you know, all of this data we make these days. And I think there's something to reconcile there, but I'm not, you know, I'm no way have a polished response to that. And then just in response, just what I said earlier about how the spreadsheet can expand and continue, you know, as the character develops. This character found 3 large lizard eggs in a dungeon, and he kept them and roosted them, and they cracked and were born, and now he has these 3 infant lizards, and you know, you can put here a little picture or whatever, and you can store it all in a very easy kind of way. And so that's sort of the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the character sheet. I'll go on, and I have 2 others I want to show you. One's a dungeon generator, and one's what I call like a challenge or a challenge system. But yeah, basically that's the idea for this one.
And I want to poke at something that Casey was talking about earlier, because this is a different angle of the data visualization thing. Is, you know, Wizards has put out like 4 or 5 different 5e character sheets. And then they do it increasing and limited success. There's the one, my least favorite one is the one with the big bubble in the center of it, where it's like you put all your stats in the middle and there's a big circle that looks like a potion bottle, everything flowing off the side or whatever. This, to me, looking at your system, it takes a little bit of front-end understanding, but like it's way more, there's something about it that feels more... like it better mediates that character creation experience than like particularly the fucking bubble D&D sheet, but some D&D sheets that have been done by Wizards of the Coast. And so I think there's something to be said not just for the data values themselves, but also that presentational space, right?
I think almost any design that Wizards put out is okay, but if you put the modifiers top, you're a fucking criminal.
I completely agree with that, Casey.
Thank you.
I agree with you too.
Completely agree with that. Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that.
Oh, like a little, like the modifiers.
What
in the
pisses me
box
off is
rather
D&D
than the bubble.
Beyond.
Oh,
D&D
don't
Beyond
get me started.
has
Oh,
modifiers taught by default, as if that's the no.
that
The
is-
big
that-
box gets the big number.
That's heresy.
I mean,
It's heresy.
also, like, it makes sense. I don't do it myself, but I don't actually use Beyond, so. But I like this. I really like the idea of, like, containers and things. It kind of allows, I don't know, the whole character sheet gives avenues for DMs to play with things. Like, I don't keep track of encumbrance usually because I think it's a pain in the rear to keep track of encumbrances.
Mhm.
Or, like, arrows and things, but being able to have a spreadsheet and be like, well, this is your spreadsheet, and you will maintain it. And you will know if you're encumbered because you have that ability to know what's in your containers and thing. And you'll know that you have pets that you have to treat because they're on your sheet. So I feel like it allows DMs the ability to delegate some of those more tedious aspects of character.
Yeah,
to
totally,
players.
totally. And having like an apparatus, like Matt Colville and MCDM, they put out Strongholds and Followers. That was like their big publication, and it's like
So good.
it's in this sort of thing, right, of abstract apparatus for having suzerainty, maybe like wider social capital and rules for how to structure that. And I think one of the good thing about promise that spreadsheets have is that kind of thing, to give you a conceptual apparatus to contain a higher concept campaign or keep track of players as their agency grows beyond their body and they have a retinue or an institution or something that they have the kind of power over. But this isn't really the most exciting spreadsheet I wanted to show you. For me personally, I like it, but this was just something to show because everybody understands what a character sheet should look like. And so, yeah. The next one I want to talk about is the dungeon generator, because this is the one I've brought onto Google Sheets most recently, and it has a lot of potential here, I think, for excitement and discussion. So it's quite simple from the outset of it, right? You have this one page and you have some text and you have a control console here. And what I've done is I wanted a way to have a dungeon as a bricolage, a kind of movement of modular parts into new combinations. And the best way to do that was like in a strict Gygaxian kind of, dungeon genre where you have monster with treasure, trap with treasure, puzzle, special, corridor, and Gygax having this idea of a dungeon as just being a series of rooms connected in some way. And I thought, well, if I could make something simple like that, then you could have an apparatus, right? And then you could fill it with whatever you want. So here, there's a room here. It's trying to tell us a description for a room. You enter a 13 by 14 foot oval shaped room. You enter from the west. You come out of you've come out of the wrong direction. Yeah, it's a little, this isn't by no means like a consumer product. This is, let's have a look. What we want is to align with a tunnel, right? So we want to go north so that we are south. Yeah, that's a rough edge. But, so, you come out of a 6 foot tunnel. Beyond the walls are rough, purple rock inset with sparkling, very dusky purple gemstones. The rock is wet with purple droplets. So that's just phrases. And you'll start with they're like branches, right? Like Bandersnatch. You start with the walls are rough rock. What color is the rock? Well, you have a random list of colors. Purple rock, inset with what? Sparkling, very dusky purple gemstones. It's sort of a random statement there. The same with the ground, freshly laid boards of white spruce. And then you have to the north, to the west, to the east, and it moves it around depending on what direction you're going. And of course, this makes no sense without a map. So I do have here a kind of map of the dungeon, and you can see.
So here's a
Go ahead.
question that I have with that, because it's a random generated thing, and a tool, and you were talking about dungeon masters learning to be as loose or as railroady as possible.
Mhm.
And I could just see a player coming in like, there's spruce. What does that mean? And then now like they expect a meaning out of it, or
Right, yeah.
so like
Hmm.
so how have you felt this in practice where like you'll have a random generated thing and you just use it for flavor, but suddenly now the players want meaning, and how do you make meaning out of it
Right, yeah.
or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's for flavor. It could also be for nourishment, Going back to that discussion we had, about Sandbox and Railroad and the level of comfort the Dungeon Master has with the uncertainty, I really like having kind of like shuffling the cards here and seeing what comes out, and just like, this is what I have to be inspired by, and responding to the uncertainty of what comes out for me is exciting, because I have to take these sorts of parts, which are arranged, like I said, in this northeast southwest kind of structure, and turn it into something. But there are caveats. It is fully randomized, but once you save a dungeon like I have here, you could go through ahead of time or as you go, and I've got these dynamic hyperlinks here, so this should bring up if we go to this west one, this should bring up the square where this is. Okay, it hasn't done that, but it was working before. The So the idea is that these hyperlinks take you to the cell. Here we go. So when you hover over edit, you have rough purple rock inset. That can take you to the cell. You can change it. The question about whether the players want to develop meaning out of the spruce boards and why they're there, that is a wider question. I think, again, about how much free rein you give your players to want to be able to go out and seek those answers. If other things, like what comes up with me in my personal experience, is usually the gemstones in the walls. They're for flavor, but then people just want to just get their knife out and just take all the gems.
I loot the wall.
Yeah.
I literally had that though. I had them in a mind flayer lair, and I was like, yeah, there's these sparkling little, diamond-like things on the wall, and like the wizard's like, I cast fabricate and I move the wall, and then the player was like, I use stone shape to make it drop the diamonds. I'm like, fuck.
I've had it where I've had players pick up on random things. Like at some point in my campaign, I was like, this started 5 years ago, and then they just kept bringing 5 years into it, and so I just rolled with it. Like, all right, everything was 5 years ago. Everything's happened 5 years ago, so you guys can keep going on this mystery. So like I can imagine, like we're talking about like spruce and stuff, that element of like improv. Be like, well, why is it spruce? Well, maybe there's connection to the northern areas where the spruce is, and so maybe you have to go north or something, and kind of incorporate that. I write notes while I'm doing campaigns because my players do things that I don't think they're gonna do. So I'm like, oh well, we have to go north now. It kind of gives the avenue for where to go.
There's an old idea in ARG composition called leaving white space or blank space in your piece, and obviously that comes out of it comes out of the community trying to develop words for the places in your narrative in an ARG that you leave open between different transmediated pieces so that people can fill in the gaps. But there's something to the connection, I think, between D&D and ARGs, in the sense of you create these things as unintentional white space. You never know what symbols your players are gonna hyper fixate on and feel connected to, and then generate their own meaning for. And then as a DM, you have to make the decision about whether you want to incorporate those meanings or not, right? Nobody was gonna the DM in one of my campaigns made a character whose name is Friendleworth, who makes random contraptions. Nobody could have predicted that I would have gone to him, other than maybe me, and requested a lazy boy called the Lazy Elf. And so now that just exists in the world, and it pops up every once in a while as a marker of, hey, you did that. This has meaning.
Totally. And I think I just want to say, somebody in the chat mentioned Espen Arseth, and definitely, I was saying to Ren the other day, ergodic literature is definitely something that inspires me here. You have a story, the outcome of which changes on how you read it, and the randomness you put in the middle will change the outcome of how it comes out. And that leads to your point there about nobody could have predicted, right, your sort of contingent actions as a player, and this kind of idea about, well, how do dungeon masters contain contingency? How do they tame uncertainty in a way that means that they're comfortable, like they're I want to talk in this dungeon generator about layers, because this is sort of one avenue in which you can have player made content, because some of the stuff is within a formula just now in the generator, but there's something called layers which comes up. So if we look at the map, we're the cyan square. We're making our way through the dungeon. This is not a map. This is more like a subway map. It warps space and time into something, square. And what we could do is, whilst you guys are talking, I'll draw one of these rooms out, on paint, so you can see that they are different shapes and sizes. Of interest here, there are stairs. And this was hard. This was one of the most irritating parts of the situation, because I wanted stairs, and I wanted, when you go down the stairs, for there to be stairs here for you to come out of on the second level. And let's now see if live on Twitch it's going to work or not. So here we have, to the east there's stairs, descend to P24. So if we go east, then we come out, and if we go to the mapper, we should see that we are now here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now moved a level, and so you can go right down to 6 levels, as far as I've made it, and layers, right? Yeah. So if we go back up the stairs, you'll see there are different colors here on the thing. Again, something based around Matt Colville's video about how to build encounters. You have guards, which are the blue one. You have the patrol, which moves through a series of rooms. And you have orange, which is a layer. And layers are where the boss is. It's your boss encounter, that kind of stuff. So let's go through. I'm just going to, move through the rooms, and hopefully it won't break. And we can find the various layers as they pop up. So we want to go up the stairs. We're going to go to the east. Okay. So we come back up. And, the patrol's shown up. 2 goblins. So the patrol, we can change the current layer by the ones that I have here. And these are builds that I keep on another part of the spreadsheet here. And there's just columns. And so, basically you can put in anything. We have pirates. Everything's better with pirates. And you can go through and fill out the columns. You've got the rooms that you want the patrol to go through. The what makes up the scout group. And then you have the layer boss, the infantry who fill up the room, the glass cannon who's very destructive but very fragile. You've got artillery, which are just giving range, and you've got the brute and then the boss. And like I say, those are Matt Colville's categories. But I thought they were really instructive, because what I wanted to do was take that, right, and systematize it in spreadsheets so that you can have this way of organizing data. Go ahead.
Matthew, yeah. I think it's super, super fascinating. So on the one hand, I can't stop thinking about the way in which, in My Tiny Life, Julian DeBell, he conveys some of the special power of textual virtual worlds, right?
Yeah.
That people free to write their own descriptions and basically create their own physics and their own pathways through the mud for their own little corner of the mud, and somebody ends up having a well-furnished apartment inside a pixel, inside a broken television set, inside somebody else's, room, right? So that you become aware of that sort of special property of text in the imagination to accomplish that warping of space and time very, very readily, right? Whereas at the same time, so I see that here, but at the same time, you've got both the spreadsheet, and I guess I'm curious to hear you say more about what is the relationship between the commitment to the spreadsheet and the commitment to kind of ordinal directionality that you have moving through these spaces, because that seems to be very much in tension with the potential of this as a kind of a very insistently text-based system to tap into some of that, the imagination, imaginary possibilities for our player group.
Yeah, I think, the visual, I think I take that in 2 ways. The first one is, first thing it made me think of was back to this Gygax thing, this strict, you could call it like a chronotope, like a genre of agency. And how do you imagine space and time and agency working together? And the Gygax chronotope is very strict. You have a world split up into 5 feet squares, you have rooms connected in some way, and you have a series of dungeons and things. And that's restrictive in terms of what you can put in, but it's also because it allows for the modular rearrangement of data. You can have a list of monsters, you can have a list of traps, and you put them in where they come up. That allows you to then, within those strictures, you can have a lot of diversity. And I think that's telling about something to do with data, because it's only by shaping it into something that looks similar to other stuff that you can start to have a data management system to effectively move it around. And then the other part about the visual thing is I use paint. So let's draw this room. 11 by 11 rectangular room, long edges are east-west. So I've prepared this little guy here, 11 by 11, so probably looking for something like that. I'm aware that an 11 by 11 rectangle is also known as a square. Long edges are east-west. You come enter from the west.
A square? Hold on, what the fuck? My brain.
So you can. This is for my bug testing of it. I would just sit and draw out dungeons, go through them as they generate. And you can see what's to the east: 5 giant badgers. To the south, 5 mules. To the north, a lot of mules. So you sort of have those. And with the goblins, you've got, in true Dwarf Fortress fashion, we'll put the armored goblins in red, and you can use the lasso tool
in
to
Warhammer,
populate
when you paint
them.
things red, they move faster. So just the goblins move faster.
I think that's a law of physics, isn't it?
Yeah, red go fast.
Right, people say that about cars too.
You put flames on something, it'll go faster. Guy Fieri is very fast. He has a lot of flames in this show.
Tires, drive-ins, and speed.
This reminds me of like the east-west kind of like textual things. It reminds me of like old like text-based RPGs. They say, well, you can go left or you can go right, and so they kind of create a dungeon with text, and so like you could draw out a dungeon and be like, okay, well, I went west here, and here's what that happened, and you could draw out this whole big map just by the text of what the game is telling you. And I haven't done that, so I can't say like if those are actually like they actually turn into dungeons, or if they're just random things, like very random in their creation.
Have you played the remaster of the what is it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure?
I have no.
It's free on the web. We should do that sometime and plot that out and see how it goes, because I think that like I'm immediately called to mind how many times I've booted that up and been like, I am Arthur Dent. I will solve all these puzzles. And I feel like it very much is that experience. Like it's in a lot of ways, text adventures become your own personal dungeon crawl.
Mm-hmm. And then that kind of raises the question: is how much, or like why do humans create visual representations of text-based things? Because that's how we visualize things, right? That asks questions of imagination and visualizing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit out of my purview, but it asks questions.
So it's a little rough. I'm usually a little bit. Well, actually, when you're playing, D&D with the players and they want to see the visualization, it's also a bit of a squidge. But you can draw out the rooms, and you can draw out the whole dungeon and see how it sort of connects together. And I usually do that in Paint, and so I kind of interface between this and the describer. And what I like about it is, I don't know, I just want like a printer, that just chugs out adventure, kind of like like a cue card or something, just to prompt you and get you going. And for the layer, the current layers come up, you have in the red the special layer description, and you can and that's stored, like that's not here, it's just referenced from the layer description here, and so you can go in and you can edit it. If you see there's a typo, you don't have to go and search for it. The hyperlink is here, and that's important, right? Because most people, I mean, nobody can navigate somebody else's spreadsheet or code, it's just, but what you can do is if you can create a user interface simple enough where you have your rooms and you go through it, you draw your map and you change them. If you don't want white spruce, you can hit edit and edit it. If you don't want the pellets and furs, you can put something else in. But the layers is a way in which you can have an open back end, right? Where you can put this sheet on any of the RPG subreddits and invite people into this table to add their layers. And like, wouldn't it be great if you had 50 people doing one each, and then you have these layers to fill your dungeons with or whatever. And just that concept is what I wanted to really bring up with the dungeon generators, the idea of having a gamified way of organizing crowdsourced data and presenting it to someone in a gameful way, kind of like a tap from wherever you keep your water, a water tower. You don't want all of the water at once. You want a tap and you can turn off, turn on. And so yeah, that's what this is. And I did use the Gygax chronotope of the dungeon, and maybe that has its limits. If you want to turn this into a overland wilderness generator or a city thing, there may be limits to that, but in terms of going through a dungeon and killing monsters and getting loot, this sort of like functions to that end. Okay,
Can I ask you a question? So you may have already covered this today, but I'm mostly thinking about it from some of our earlier conversations. But this system, doesn't it allow for the following kind of possibility, which is, if you're in a room, you can populate the room with table or chair or ink pot or all these different things, and that if the players wanted to, and you're the DM, right, and this kind of automatically happened, right, and the players say, well, I want to pick up the ink pot, and take a look at it, right. The system has the potential to have a lot of those kind of items all in the back end, right? Such that as the players, this gets back to that kind of comment about the crystals along the tunnel, right?
Yeah.
As the players click on a bunch of these things, especially in as much as they evoke a broader world, right? If the investment has gone in ahead of time, then that depth will be found in that way, right?
Yeah, totally. The beauty of it is the data is just text, right? And if you can keep in the back end lists of items, then those can be easily transformed into, like, you could imagine a macro that takes if you highlight for example here the pelts and furs, you highlight that and have a macro where it copies that to the last row of your inventory, and so you have a description here which is transformed straight away into an object. I think, to go back to when I was showing the player character sheet, the actual books that I have in the inventories, these can link to an actual Word document, and so you can have the idea of it being it's not just on a sort of classic paper character sheet where you just write down a book, but you can explore the hypertextual possibilities, by having it linked to another page where you have an actual book. And then this book is kind of like the one I give to all the Magic users when they start the campaign. So, it gets round, but it's just the way in which it interfaces with the game is through the spreadsheet, because you're able to store data in pretty flexible ways for the things that we need it to do.
So when you describe the advantages, so much of it seems to be about that kind of immediate access, right? Based on whatever the contingencies of what the players are asking for or doing or what you need. That's very cool.
That's right, because you have communities like DM maker communities on Reddit, like r/d100 or Unearthed Arcana, where people are already doing this. They're crowd sourcing narrative data or potentials, and putting them into D100 lists, and that's great for me because I can just take that and put them into a column, And I'd love to show, another time how you write the formulas to take random values and put them together and make something new, like I do here. So I just have one more spreadsheet I want to show off. And it's, sorry, was someone gonna say something? Please go ahead, just interrupt.
Oh, I was gonna comment because I'm really bad at, like, I can imagine this kind of interfacing. There's gonna be some labor translating, but there's a lot of really great websites. I think DM Tools or 5etools.org or something like that has tables and tables of, like, loop tables of being like, oh, you can add this, like, roll on D10, D100, and you'll get I don't know, a +1 weapon or something. Like, I have magic loot, and they also have, like, mundane loot and that kind of stuff. And I'm really terrible at making dungeons with good, rewarding loot. I'm just kind of like, well, you're here to kill the monsters. Who cares if you get good loot? Just kill the monsters.
Totally.
So I can imagine having that in the back end and being like, well, it'll just generate me something to have. Like, having that labor beforehand allows me not to, like, scramble at the time and figure out loot.
I'm like that, but for every aspect of the dungeon. I really like going through dungeons, but there's just too many variables. And so, to what you mentioned, I just wanted to note that my monsters here come from an open source archive, an already existing Google Sheet of all the 5th edition monsters and some custom content with sources. And I was just able to get this, slap it in the spreadsheet, set this to randomize in the place where the rooms are put together here, and it draws from that table, and that's open source. That's free to get. You put it in, and then. But the thing is, it's about how helpful is this data. What I do. I think the rule is for placing monsters, and this was, I want to get into the nitty gritty just for a moment. The way that I actually place monsters, as is expressed here, is we index the monster load. So this one here is just a repeat of the other one, but just with the monsters I want to have in. I don't want dolphins in my cave, So you have the things here. And in the designer, it says index that column, which here is just the name of the monster. And then we want ran between two kinds of rows, because I have the data organized, and this is important, by hit points. So it's going to randomize between two rows, and it's basically going to find a selection like this and then randomize between it. And that's based on, I think the rule I had was the room number, which increases as you go down, and you have that Gygaxian thing of it getting more difficult the deeper you go. And then you multiply that by this difficulty thing here. So if I were to increase this would increase the level 1 difficulty of the starting difficulty of the monsters. And so it's, the interesting thing is when you get to those rules, it's like, I had to decide how I'm going to place the monsters, and that's just the rule I came up with. But it's always something that changes. If slightly away from, we were talking about the front end, this is back end stuff. But it's important because... so the next one is not a Gygaxian chronotope. It is instead something I came up with because I had a friend who was playing a quest giver, and the idea was he would organize groups of heroes and send them off on quests and run them as so there's a level of abstraction there. He's not actually going on the quests. But at the same time, I wanted a mini game that, would create tension and suspense about whether they would succeed or not. So,
now you're Square Enix.
Sorry, Square Enix.
Yeah. Oh, my bad.
I'm sorry, I don't. There's probably a lot of references I don't get when it comes to even D&D. But so here, just to demonstrate how it works. You have a machine that you can store multiple NPCs and their scores. I have a couple of custom ones here, but you got strength, dexterity, etc. And then what you can do is you can roll to see what happens. So I think if I just do this, hopefully it'll work. Maybe not. I didn't actually check this beforehand. But the idea is that on this side, this is the side that I see. Um, this is the part that I see. And what I'll do is I think I randomly generate coordinates are inside of the dimensions of the sheet. Here we go. So it randomly creates a series of challenges, skill challenges, which I think is a 5th edition concept. And the idea is that the group has to get at least one successful pass on these, and they're all going to roll. And when they do, they get a pass or a fail. And there'll be various kind of, if you need 3 passes out of 4 to win or whatever. Now the fun for me is, and this is again giving me like the idea of playing a game and responding to uncertainty, is I don't know what this is going to be until I randomize it. And then my job is to describe to the player what kind of quest it is. So strength followed by luck, intelligence, and dexterity. That could be anything. That could be a gauntlet, right? So the group has to survive a royal gauntlet in order to become the champion. And once they get the champion, they're given one wish. And maybe this is for the quest giver character. He wants that wish because it's very valuable. Maybe he could sell it off to what people want to wish for. And so I would say the gauntlet thing and stuff, all just made up from the combination of stuff here, whatever comes into my head. And then based on that, the player puts together the party that he wants to send to the gauntlet. And then you can see here, the first one is strength. And so that's come up down here. And then, inside the dimensions of the sheet, is that because this is... So, and then if I do that, yeah, it's because I added in, I think if I delete this, it might work. No. Anyway, the concept was that they all roll, and then you count the successes, and then you can have that kind of... I designed it just like a gambling machine, you know, this idea of high stakes bets and fast...
Fast cars.
Yeah, fast cars, yeah.
Fast Fieries.
So yeah, that's just sort of like a medley of the spreadsheets that I've put together, and the kinds of things that excite me, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like this idea. I think when you talk about the galaxy stuff, my dad actually made, back in the day of like iPhone 4, I think it was that era, he actually made like a dungeon generator, and it was very similar. Like he programmed one for iOS, and it was very similar to how you have it. He was like, to the south you see some mules, to north you see bees. He had a space for like expensive items, and then a random encounter one like you had. So he was
that's interesting.
it'd be like, oh, you find 10 gems. Like that's kind of what's special in this room. So that's really, I just thought it was kind of neat when you're talking about like the levels and stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure my dad programmed something like this.
Yeah,
it's no
totally.
longer available, so you can't go find it. But
I mean, that's the sad thing about you know, a lot of this stuff is it's retrograde, and so it becomes obsolete. You can't run them on modern computers without a lot of hassle. And that's but just to that point about Google Sheets, you know, and what that says about that is that, you know, Google Sheets is just like an incredible tool here, because you can take all this stuff that's maybe always been able to happen, and because anybody with an internet connection can open a Google Sheet, you can have this mass appeal, you know, almost outside of the kind of, you know, the platform market. I mean, people do need to have a Google account to view it. I guess that's the caveat, but...
Yes, you have to play into the corporate bureaucratocracy or whatever.
But if all Google knows about you is that you go on Sheets and look at Excel spreadsheets for DMs, I don't think you're giving them too much money.
You get a message from the Google overlords. Hey, you've been staring at spreadsheets for an awfully long time. Are you okay?
Are your eyes okay? But I can imagine the fact that I used to use Excel like sheets and stuff for like a student org, and it's fantastic what you can do with Sheets, as well as I didn't think about the integration with like Google Docs and stuff, but the fact that it can be integrated and like shift around, you can have all this data just kind of there is really cool, especially if you're like if you put the labor in beforehand to make a really comprehensive world and have all these interconnected things, or get your players to help you make it, or that kind of stuff, it makes, like, of course it takes a very specific like play group. If they want to do dungeon crawls and they want to make the dungeons with you, that's fantastic. That's like a game within itself. Just being like, hey, let's make some cool dungeons, and then let's run those dungeons.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
I think the layers thing works because it meets halfway, right? You don't have to design a whole dungeon. You have this kind of one layer of the random generated northeast, southwest, and then you put the layer into it. One thing I would like to do with this dungeon generator is have like I would call it the meta dungeon. And it would be this thing where we randomly make one and everybody does a layer. But then what we do is we play through it, and every time a character dies, they swap out with the dungeon master. And
yeah, that's a really cool idea.
They sit behind the screen and just pick up from where they left off, because you never really need to know more than the 10 or so lines of data that's here, I guess. You don't need to really think beyond the room's scale. And so,
well, that's interesting. That experience has kind of been mediated by a game called Crawl. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, I haven't, but I will check it out. Crawl?
So it's a little, it's an 80s kind of schlock style game where instead of being a dungeon that you generate together, it generates a random, like, roguelike dungeon, and one person controls the monster, or two people control the monsters, and one person is the hero, and every time the hero dies, whoever killed him jumps into his body and starts pushing, things further, and the other two are trying to kill him constantly.
Yeah,
and so there's the tension of that asymmetric gameplay style. But there is something interesting about that game in that it only mediates an element of the cooperation that can happen, whereas if you do it with D&D and you're really building the dungeon itself, there's an entire other section of the cooperation that's being generated.
I think that, this is where I may sound like a supervillain, but in the, the early idea of D&D in Southern California, during the first and second edition, maybe the first editions, second editions, was this idea that you could take your character between people's dungeons because they were all in the same world. And so you could go from friend A and take the same character to friend B and play in both dungeons, and it is one larger world. And I think that I would just, submit the idea that, maybe Gygax always intended for a kind of larger living collective effervescent sui generis dungeon, that was able to be universal. Maybe the rule books, were a blueprint, for how to make dungeons, and the most important component of that being the dungeon master as a computer. Gygax used to pull out the drawers of his filing cabinet and completely segregate himself from his players in his basement when he was playtesting, so that all they could hear was the voice, and they would map the dungeon themselves, and they would elect a leader to talk to the dungeon master. And
this is where the separation between different editions comes from, right? Like, that first edition is this very different experience than even second edition is.
Well, there's also, like, confusion with if Advanced D&D is technically second edition stuff. But yeah, I think Gary Gygax, he's such a, I don't want to say unattainable standard, but to me he's an unattainable standard. Like, I have my players, I'm like, well, in game 5 months from now, this big cataclysm is going to happen, and you're going to have to avoid it. But keeping track of those 5 months in game is almost impossible for me, because it's so hard to do that. But Gygax is was able to keep track of weeks, arrows, all that kind of stuff. Gygax was a master of that kind of thing. And and with talking about, like, carrying characters to place, Wizards of the Coast has kind of, I'm going to say, like, rejuvenated that idea with their, like, adventure leagues.
Sword Coast Adventures as well.
Oh, yeah.
Sword Coast Adventures, like, the kind of, I don't know, I'm talking kind of out of my ass, because I don't quite know how it works, but you have a character for an adventure league, and you go to these Wizards of the Coast sanctioned areas with standard things, and you level up your own character, and you go from place to place and getting different loot. As long as it's an adventure league thing, it's an adventure league thing.
Yeah.
So.
And before that, Greyhawk tried to do the same thing, and Sword Coast builds off of Greyhawk, so...
Yeah. And I think Pathfinder also does something, or Paizo does something similar to Pathfinder. But maybe David, our resident non-DMer, non-D&D'er, what do you think of the spreadsheets?
I like them. Sorry, it got a little too technical for me, but I do think the thing that I kind of glommed onto is interesting is that the D&D itself is kind of like an immersive storytelling experience in the fact that like it occurs obviously with the participation of a group, but it occurs like across media, and the coordination of developing that story is mediated over a variety of platforms, right? So like I'm thinking like even the coordination of an event where storytelling can take place, I would argue is part of the storytelling process. And so like this is like another addition to that where like it's mediated in another way. And I think like including this in the network of other mediated ways the story gets told is like, that's where I come from, because like I'm more from the cultural studies side anyways. So like to me that's intriguing. But I don't know enough about like D&D proper to really formulate anything better than that.
I think that was right on the nose. I mean, it's this idea of, adding another kind of media layer which allows more networked sharing between dungeon masters in a format which is more immediate, like Thomas brought up. I don't want to have to take a module and read it. I don't want to have to take a list and then edit it and cut it up. I want it to be, a library of somebody else's dungeons that I can whack into my own machine and already be going through their rooms, looking at how they design it, and seeing how creative people can be within the constraints imposed by this system of the generator.
Yeah. Well, we're almost to 1:00, so.
Yeah, well, we should finish up there. Was I supposed to push a record button?
It's fine. We'll grab the VOD off of Twitch. It came through pretty clean, so I feel good.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody. I've had a really good time. Of course, being able to soapbox my mad computations, and yeah, I look forward to more of it in the future. We'll see.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Yeah, audience.
End stream.